Well, good morning, Tom.
Good morning.
So great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us on Michelle's Conversations That Matter today. Happy Monday.
Yeah, happy Monday. My pleasure.
I'm so grateful. I've known you for a short amount of time, but in the time I have known you, our dear friend Jennifer introduced me to you. I have been really so inspired by the work you're doing. I think it's so important. I love the stand that you are for kids, and it's incredible to see the work that you're doing, the book that you wrote, all the speaking you're doing. But I wanted to just real quick. So Michelle's Conversations That Matter really is about having there be open discussion about topics that maybe people don't want to talk about, and hopefully leaves people a little inspired or educated in a certain area. And with my company, Trifecta, I'm out to cause more compassion in the workplace and really help people not be embarrassed about their mental illness, and do my part to sort of eliminate stigma and create more compassion. So today we're going to talk about youth and devices. And I know that this topic is very important to many parents, especially now. Kids are now either doing a hybrid format of education, and they have their personal use of their devices. So it's really prevalent that they're using them more and more. So I'm real excited to talk to you, an expert in this field. So could you take a moment, Tom, to introduce yourself, who you are, where you live, what you do?
Yep. So my name's Tom Kirby, and I am a licensed psychotherapist. I have a private practice over in Park Ridge, New Jersey. I live in Upper Saddle River, and I'm also the author of the brand new book that just came out last month called Disconnected: How to Protect Your Kids from the Harmful Effects of Device Dependency. And that book's the second edition of the original one that I wrote in 2017. So it's lots of updates, and major publisher has put it out there. And it's just, if you look at the reviews on Amazon, it says pretty much it's like 251 reviews, I think. And it's the number one sentence is every parent has to read this book. And it's true. They do.
Are our kids addicted to technology?
Indeed, they are. So a couple of years ago, the World Health Organization actually officially recognizes gaming disorder as a classifiable diagnosable condition. As far as screen, that there's something not quite, the American Psychological Association has been kind of tossing around, putting in their guide something called screen addiction disorder. But they haven't done it because I think they've been strong-armed, to be honest with you, from the tech industry, which kind of controls the whole country right now.
We had an earlier conversation about the connection between device use and self-esteem. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a whole section in the book, and when I'm out lecturing, I created a term that I call it cyber self-esteem. And essentially it's this in a nutshell. So you imagine a child, okay, that's 10, 11, 12, and they get their first device. And the average age right now of first device issuance is 10.5 years old. And when I'm out lecturing and I ask parents, and if it's 200-300 people in the audience, I'll say, do you think it's smart for an 11-year-old to have a smartphone? Raise your hand. Nobody's ever raised their hand. And that's because everybody knows it's a bad idea, but there's something I talk about called social conformity in the book. But before I get into that, the self-esteem is kind of like this, right? You take an adolescent. So if I could give the word adolescence a one-word definition, I would use the word insecure. So it's a developmental stage, a transition where you're going from childhood, you're going through puberty. All of these things are happening, right? For kids, they're changing hormonally. They're trying to figure out, where they fit in a social pecking disorder, social pecking order, not disorder.
Yes.
So in and of itself, it's a challenging time with self-esteem. Now you throw in the screens, all right, the social media, and now our kids, young kids in that very critical developmental stage, have what I call a front row movie screen to the day-to-day doings of all of their friends, the highlight reel of all their friends and so forth. So what they're essentially doing is absorbing all of this sort of superficial external accolades that their peers are accomplishing. And the gradual message as they marinate in all of the superficial stuff is this: everyone else's life is so much better than mine. And when I'm lecturing, I'll say, self-esteem, the important word there is the word self. All right. So it's an internal thing. Happiness is an inside out thing, not an outside in thing. And that's where we're at with our kids, because they're getting all of these superficial thumbs up and likes and all this stuff. And it's actually having a reverse effect. It's damaging their self-esteem.
Yeah, that's I think adults deal with that as well. I mean, I think we're all victim of that, like being, whether or not we realize we're doing this comparison, it happens when you're on social media. Um, you also you believe heavily in this mindfulness and meditation and having kids sort of go there and start to get connected to themselves. Can you talk a little bit about why you think that's so important?
Yeah, the final section of the book is all about that. And it's pretty much this. You ready? So when I'm out lecturing to kids, and I've done many, many of those lectures, and I start getting into the section on self-esteem and so forth, I'll ask a kid in the front row, I'll say, okay, who are you? Okay. And the kid will inevitably say, well, what do you mean? I'll be like, who are you? And they'll say, well, I'm John Smith. And I say, okay. And I go to the next kid, well, I'm Tony Jones. And then I'll say, all right, now ask me who I am. And they'll say, well, who are you? And my response is, well, I am a powerful, spiritual, motivated, determined, caring, loving, powerful being. All right. Because that's what we all are, not just me. That's what all of us are. But the only way to know what that is by repose, by being in the silence, by sitting in silence, being present in the moment, you using your own mind, experiencing your own emotions, and directing your thoughts, orchestrating your own thinking. Mm-hmm. Today's kids don't know what boredom is or downtime, because every single spare second that they have, they're immersed in some sort of a screen or device. So ultimately, they and adults are distracting themselves from self, okay, from who they are, and they don't know they're doing it, and they don't never develop a sense of self. And that's where the whole mindfulness, some lessons I give in the book about, really being aware, using meditation, visualization to really, really get to know what lies deep beneath the meat suit of the human being.
You and I talked about boredom a little bit, about how, boredom fosters creativity. And I remember even as a little girl, trying to find things to occupy myself when I was bored. Like, I remember moments of boredom and how that sparked me to be more creative. Like, I guess it's so hard to create that. So how do parents, how do they intervene? How do they help their kids not be so dependent on their device without being the bad guy?
Well, I know that's that's the ultimate problem we have right now. Like back when I was a kid, we were just running around outside and making shapes out of clouds, this and that. I started, and I put something in the new version of the book, and I got this idea from a gentleman that was at one of my lectures, and I call it the phone-free school zone pledge. And basically, it's very simple. It's just a simple pledge that said, for example, when schools send out, the packet over the summer. Mm-hmm. So imagine parents of a kindergartner, first, second, or third grade, and in the packet, there's a form that says, I agree not to purchase a smartphone for my child until late adolescence. So any rational parent when their kids are that age are going to say, absolutely, I'm going to sign this. And then they're going to, and what the goal is that they, start to talk to friends of theirs in their community. And then suddenly now you have a collective agreement among mm-hmm. many, many parents in the community that they're not going to get their kids a smartphone. And that in and of itself, something like that is gonna alter, them just getting addicted and immersed in their screens and hopefully allow them to experience their own creativity and so forth. And while I'm talking about that, there's a company that I heard about a year ago, and I started mentioning them at my lectures. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, one of the representatives actually read my book and reached out to me. And I'm kind of working with them as an ambassador. Mm-hmm. And the name of the company is called Gabb Wireless, GABB.
Okay.
And they make something known as a smarter smartphone. So it's a phone that looks just like the smartphone. So a kid's never going to be caught dead with a flip phone. Yeah. But this Gabb Wireless, it looks just like a smartphone, like an iPhone. Mm-hmm. But all you could do is it just has, it has no internet access. So there's no social media or anything like that. And it's it's just a really good way to start kids off so they can, know where they are. They could text you. They can still take photos and videos and download them on their computer. Yeah, and they have a promotion too for anybody who's watching right now. So if you decide to get your kid that, there's if you go on their website, Gabb, and you put in a promotion, Smart Parent, I think you get like $10 off the phone, and the phone is normally $99. So it's something that I think that they're really making moves, this company, globally, and it's something I really believe in. So I think that is going to help in and of itself. Something as simple as that is going to help foster, more of this creativity, because our kids won't be lost in their devices all day.
I love that. You you mentioned about the impact of neurological, the neurological impact on too much screen time. You mentioned that to me. What could you talk about the neurological impact of too much screen time, and also this idea of neuropruning? You mentioned that to me as well.
Yeah, so in the book, so this is actually how I got into this topic. I worked at a public high school for 25 years, and going back about 11 years ago, it was September of 2001, I believe. What year were we in? 2020. So no, we started around 2000. It's like 9 or 10 years ago, and I ran a committee called the 504 committee, and a 504 is an accommodation plan that might be granted to a student that has a disability, but they're not eligible for an IEP. And that's something that comes out of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which is an anti-discrimination law. So, the typical, over the years of running that committee, the typical types of disorders that we would feel to be physical disorders, things like Crohn's disease, diabetes, and so forth. And I remember September 01, I'm sitting in a meeting, and we have a parent. Parents always have to come in first. And, their son had just been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder at 14 or 15. And I remember that was the first time I ever saw that at that age, because the average age of diagnosis for ADHD is age 8. And by age 5, if you have a kid with ADHD, you can't not notice it. So here we had a 14-year-old. I was like, wow, how did this kid slip through all the classic symptoms, inattentiveness, lack of focus? So lo and behold, from that point on to the rest of the school year, just about every referral we had was for kids with ADHD that had been recently diagnosed. That's where I started getting into this research. And I came across the research of a renowned physician by the name of Gary Small. And one of the researchers in his team coined a term that he referred to as acquired ADHD. And what he meant by that is this. The way the brain works, getting to your question, there's something known as neuroplasticity. So any human brain that is involved in anything considered highly stimulating for 3 hours or more per day, the brain, there's these tree branch looking things that are called, the electrical impulses in the brain. The brain will grow, those are called neural pathways, will grow new neural pathways to adapt to that environment. And we know that kids are spending 9 hours a day, not 3 hours a day, in the most highly stimulating world. Furthermore, each one of those neural pathways is critical to human functionality. One of them might be the one you need to be able to be a good communicator, another to be a good listener, et cetera, et cetera. And when they're underutilized, that's where something called neural pruning comes in. And neural pruning is the brain's natural ability to prune away any pathways or weaken any pathways that aren't being utilized. And anecdotally speaking, I've noticed that the communication skills, because I work with kids every day in my private practice, the communication skills has been greatly compromised. With the body language, the reactions and responses and so forth. And what I theorize is that is because kids don't spend very much time at all in face-to-face interaction, which is a learned endeavor.
Yeah. That's like it. So that leads me to my next question, which is, okay, so now we have kids with devices, and now because of COVID, kids are actually having to learn on computers for, part of the time right now. What do you think the repercussions of that is going to be, that they're not getting that face time? And what can parents be doing to think about, how do I offset that? Do I make sure that I'm having all the kids over? Do I, facilitate? What can parents do to sort of offset this increase?
So I'll tell you what I'm seeing just, every day. A lot of kids, particularly teenagers, are having a really hard time focusing on the teacher, because that's all they do is look at screens all day long. And now, instead of being in a regular classroom, here they are on a screen again, and their minds are wandering all over the place. Here's a tip, all right? And this is something I've been saying since the spring. I've been warning a lot of parents, particularly of middle school and high school kids. If your child is doing computer-based learning from home, right, through Zoom or whatever it is, most of them are in their bedrooms, okay, doing it. And this is something parents have to hear that are listening right now. Do not allow the phone to be anywhere near your child while they're doing their on the computer learning, because they can't help themselves. They're getting an alert every 10 seconds on their phone. And the brain cannot do two things at once. You cannot look at your phone like this real quick and then comprehend what that teacher just said. You just can't do it, especially if you keep looking at it every minute or every 10, 15 seconds. So what I predict, unfortunately, is that we're going to see a drop in academic performance because of that alone.
Because you're now having two devices competing, and kids are isolated in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like multitasking, I talk about in the book, like multitasking is task switching. All right. The higher the level the multitasker, the more lousy you are at multitasking, because multitasking is not something you can do. The brain can only do one thing at a time.
Yeah.
So if I'm sitting here trying to, have this conversation with you, and then I keep looking over here at, at whatever, I'm not picking up on what you're saying.
You're not. Yeah.
That.
You're not present. I know. It's funny because I used to think I was pretty good at multitasking. Actually, I wasn't. I was pretty crappy at both, thinking that I could do it, You talk a little bit about, let's go back to behaviors and things that parents can do. And you actually have said to me, sometimes parents have to just be good parents, and they need to put their foot down. You believe strongly that kids shouldn't have their phones in their bedrooms. Talk to us a little bit about that.
100%. I mean, so before I retired from the high school, which was January 31st, for about 2 years, because I'm always doing my own sort of research and stuff just right in front of me, because I'm like the guy on the front lines dealing with all the problems as a therapist and as a former school counselor. And I would ask, I probably spoke to about 100 high school kids, different kids, right? And all of them, they'd come to my office, and sometimes they'd be having issues. Sometimes they just want to come in and hang out during their lunch and so forth. Kids that trusted me, they knew that it was confidential when that door is closed. And I asked them, roughly 100 of them, each and every one of them, I said, what time do you go to sleep at night? Be totally honest with me during the school week. And almost every one of them said they go to bed between 1 and 4 a.m. every night, and their parents don't know. And it's because they have their phones, they have their Snapchat, they have their TikTok, they have YouTube, Netflix, all these things on their phone, and they can't get themselves to put the darn things down and go to sleep. So now we have a sleep deprivation issue, chronic sleep deprivation issue in our society. So the phone should never, be in a kid's bedroom at all. All right. Because then we don't know what they're doing. Whatever we think they're doing on their phone is 10 times worse than what you believe it is. Trust me.
Mm-hmm. And we also talked a little bit about how we have to lead by example. We have to be the one, like you were sharing a story with me about even, I think as adults, we get sucked into the phone. We get sucked into who's posting, who's sending me a message, and we get distracted being present. So like, how important is it that parents sort of lead by example and create that undivided time when they're present with their family, so the kids can see what that looks like and not be like, well, it's okay for them to do it, right?
Exactly. Well, that's tip number one. Tip number one is right there. We have to practice what we preach, because adults are spending equally as much time on devices as kids, believe it or not, according to the latest statistics. So, we can't, that would be hypocritical if we're telling our kids, all right, you got to get off your device, and then there we are, constantly all day doing it. But these devices are designed that way. Anybody that's seen that documentary, the recent one called The Social Dilemma, that's out on Netflix, I watched about half of it, and I already knew a lot about all this stuff. The tech industry, they have computer engineers, thousands of them, designing these things with algorithms so that it gets your attention. Like if you're on YouTube, for example, and I'm a New York Yankee fan, and all of a sudden I'm watching Derek Jeter's 3,000th hit. Quickly, all of a sudden there's more and more clips about that. So they really drag you down a rabbit hole, because you get a little reward system. You get a hit of dopamine, every time you see that. And if you're a kid and you get a like, or you get a Snapchat streak, whatever it is, you get a hit of dopamine. Yeah. And that little hit of dopamine is a feel-good chemical that's tied to addiction. Yeah. And that's why we have chronic obsession and compulsion with all these things.
It's amazing. We also talked about, God, there were so many different things that I remember having a conversation with you about. And I think it was around, the thing that I wanted to talk about was around, parents, the parents' role, as we just mentioned, but like, what about the idea of like a no phone or no tech evening, or some type of what do you recommend practical practice-wise for families?
Yeah, so very simple stuff, all right? So you get, number one, you got to practice what you preach, right? So that means when we're home with our kids, we don't want to spend every second of our time to be in our phones. We got to put those things down, put them in a crate or whatever you might have. I get these crates and these things from people. I think I actually have one right here. I'll show it to you. Be present, right? Somebody sent this to me.
I love it. Create your phone.
Create your phone. Yeah, I'm actually my computer is on top of it right now, so we got the right angle here. But put it something like that's just a reminder. We have to put those things aside. Another very important tip for parents is this, especially for boys: don't allow video games during the school week. I mean, it's as simple as that. If you let your kid play video games, there's nothing wrong with video games, but if you're playing, 4 or 5 hours a day or more every day, that's a problem. And the issue is that if somebody, a kid that knows they could play video games when they're done with their homework, they fly through their homework. Fly through their studies to get to the video game. And furthermore, when they're at school, they can't wait to get home and play Fortnite or Call of Duty, and they're distracted by that. They're not paying attention to the teacher. So there's that. We got to keep these things out of the bedroom. We got to get our kids involved in household chores, helping them make dinner, take out the garbage, unload the dishwasher, get our kids to be stakeholders in our own families. It's not rocket science. Another thing that I recommend for parents is if you drive your kids to school, one thing I noticed before I retired from the high school is whenever I looked in the rearview mirror, and it was one entrance into the high school of 1,200 kids, every single time I looked in the rearview mirror and there was a kid in the passenger seat, this is what the sight was.
Yeah.
So we're not, the family, the dinner table, go for it, like the way we used to. We got to try to have regular family dinners, and we're not. I mean, we're distracted. Even when we have dinner, a lot of families, the kids are on their devices, the parents are on devices. The 5-minute car rides to school and back, we're missing out. And when you add all that up, on countless hours of critical communication and connection with our kids.
Yeah. And we also mentioned, I think at one point, you and I were talking about a detox, and I was thinking of it more for the adult, right? But I think a tech detox is a good idea. And I said, oh, I'll do a week. And I think you said to me 30 days or something. And I was like, what?
Yeah, it's pretty ambitious. Now, if you try to I'll put it to this way, any parents listening, if you have a 14 or 15-year-old and you say, we're going to have a family detox, there's no electronics for 30 days, your kid is going to go berserk. They're going to go crazy. So you got to maybe start, a little bit smaller, educate your kids. Kids should read my book, by the way. It was written for parents, but I've had many parents across the country say I made my kid read it. My kid was like, wow, and started making some changes. But anyway, so that's, the detox. I mean, we could do like Friday night family detox nights, anything that we could do.
Yeah.
Even the little things all add up, but it's the little things every day that make a difference. Like don't allow them to have phones in their bedroom. Also you can monitor your kids' screen time. The only app I recommend is called Net Nanny. And Net Nanny, they rebranded. I know the guys, and that's like the original parenting app. But features that you could do, I mean, that phone has, you can literally, have your kid's phone shut down after 2 hours. You can put a time limit on the amount of time they have on their phone. And every website that your kid goes to, you get a pop-up alert on your phone so you can see. I know it sounds like spying, but we need to know what our kids are doing, especially the younger ones. Right.
And I guess at the end of the day, your book is Disconnected? Disconnected. And I think at the end of the day, the opposite of disconnected is we as families get connected face to face more than anything. But it's, I guess, the challenge we have is with COVID, everyone's connected virtually because a lot of things have gone away with the face-to-face connection. So it's hard.
Yeah. So the original, like I said, the first edition of the book, I self-published it. The other book is a different cover and a slightly different title, to your point. So the title of this book is Disconnected: How to Protect Your Kids from the Harmful Effects of Device Dependency. The original title that I had, the first edition, was Disconnected: How to Reconnect Our Digitally Distracted Kids. And the whole idea was exactly your point right there. Yeah. That we really need to, in order to reconnect with one another, we gotta disconnect. We're hypnotized all day long. Human beings, we are social, emotional beings. We're supposed to be doing what you and I are doing, but in person.
And talking and connecting and what's going on. Do you have any other recommendations, any final wisdom you want to leave folks with? And how can they reach out to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, you can find me, you go to my website, it's tomkirsting.com. The book is anywhere you can buy books, Disconnected and so forth. But I just want to tell, parents that, we need to, our kids, we actually can't really teach our kids how to be in control of these things. We have to be in control of them for them. Their brains aren't developed yet. That prefrontal cortex part of the brain that's responsible for impulsivity and decision-making. So we have to do it for them. We have to set the parameters and the rules, and there's going to be blowback. And that's okay. We have to deal with that. And I remember one time years ago, I was listening, hearing a guy lecture. He was talking about teenagers, and he said something that always stuck with me. He said, if your teenager doesn't hate you, you're doing something wrong. So obviously not hate you. But yeah, I mean, if your kids are, if your kids are, aren't getting upset with the decisions you make, then you're not doing the right decisions. And I also say in the book that the number one word in a parental vocabulary should be the word no.
Yeah, I heard that a lot as a child, and I think it's served me. And looking back now, it served me. But when you're in it, it's not fun to be said no to. That's for sure. It's not. Fun. What are you up to? Don't you have a seminar or something that you're offering? What are you up to?
Yeah, I was all over the country lecturing, and I absolutely love. I used to have panic attacks when I was younger. I was like 22 years old. I remember like when the principal at the high school, it's my first job, says, "Oh yeah, next Monday I need you to speak at a faculty meeting." And I can't even tell you, like, if you've ever had a panic attack, it's like the fear of public speaking. So I overcame that years ago, and it's something I love. And I was going all over the country, and then COVID hit, and that ended. So now I'm trying to get this message out. So I just set up for my first times. I'm not really good with all this stuff. I set up a lecture on Eventbrite. It's called Kids. I forget what it's called. Kids in Screens.
Oh, so wow!
I'll send you the link if you want to put it.
Yeah, we'll put it in the notes so people, if they're interested and want to take it, they can hop on and get more information.
Yeah, I'm doing it this Thursday at 7 p.m. So I don't have many people signed up, but that's okay.
Yeah, no, I think it's important. And are you available to speak at schools? If schools are interested in wanting to have you, would you do a virtual presentation with them?
Oh yeah. I'm doing one next week actually for the Tenafly School District near me.
Yeah. I think it's important that we talk about this, because by not talking about it, it can, further exacerbate, and then, we compromise our kids. And you're a dad too, so Yeah,
I know. And even me, I'm a dad. I have a 17-year-old son, and my daughter's going to be 14 on Friday. And I'm the guy that wrote the book and knows everything about this. And I struggle with my own kids.
Yeah.
And they use probably a bare minimum of what other kids use, but it's still a battle. And it's just unfortunate that this is where we are right now. And I do worry about, about the future. I mean, with our kids and so forth, and just, it's very dehumanizing. All of this technology is dehumanizing. It's taking us from our natural element.
You were a big advocate about having a hybrid or some type of face-to-face school when we were talking about this earlier before the school year began. You were very outspoken about that kids needed that connection, and they need sports, and they need the things that, are going to help them develop. But it's hard, to strike a balance with trying to stay safe from COVID and keep our kids, getting that social emotional development with their friends. Right.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about the mental well-being of our kids as they're completely, isolated as human beings than I am about them than what COVID will do to them. And I think some of the research, depending on what news network you watch, suggests that the damage to kids, their mental and emotional well-being, and unfortunately the suicide rate, more kids are gonna suffer and potentially die because of that, more so than from COVID.
COVID.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm looking at, and I see it. Thankfully, I haven't seen any recent deaths by suicide, but I'm seeing a lot of kids right now just really just sinking into depressions and and major anxiety and so forth, and just from the social isolation, because it's their natural habitat is being out there running around.
And so Tom, based on your background, what can a parent do if they sense their child is depressed, or they're not themselves, or they're just sort of out of it?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing you have to do is you have to have a real, a deep conversation with your child. And if your kid is depressed and they really never had any symptoms of that, bring them to a therapist, somebody like me, somebody that they can communicate with and talk to and understand their mind and their thoughts and reframe things for them, and help them have, develop a healthier outlook and so forth, and find that inner strength that we all have within us. That's what I would suggest.
Are there any signs that we need to be looking for aside from the obvious, if they just seem down?
Yeah, I mean, just basically if your kid doesn't seem like him or herself, you see, they're maybe removed from the family. They don't have the same level, the same energy. They might not be as interested even when sports do come back. They might be struggling a little bit in school. Just pick up, like human beings. We communicate more non-verbally than we do verbally. We feel people at an energetic level. So just go with, that's what the gut feeling is. If you sense that something's not right with your kid, then something's not right with your kid. And you want to open up that dialogue immediately.
Immediately. I think that's the key, because we lose kids by stepping over something that might not be comfortable. And I think that's where we have to check our own biases at the door and be like, what's paramount here is that my child is okay, not that it's weird to talk about mental health,
Yeah. It's mental health is, it's a normal discussion, and I think I never looked, it's interesting. I've been, a private practice therapist for 20 years. And I tell people, when they come into my office, oftentimes people are, especially kids, they're like reluctant at first because, people associate going to a therapist with, I have problems. And I'll tell them, you don't have problems, you have solutions, but you don't know what those solutions are. And that's what I'm going to help you with. A real problem is looking out the window and there's a 747 coming right at your location. No problem. All these other things are just circumstances and thought, all things that can be redirected and built upon.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Thank you for giving us some of your time this morning, for sharing with us. People can get in touch with you. We're going to put the link into your Eventbrite offer, the book as well. I'll put the link in for that. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
My pleasure.
All right. We will stay in touch with you and follow your work. Thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate it.
Okay.